Yeah, Kevin, it was great to for you to break the ice with Ben and hear about kind of your spin on what's important to ask about TWOT and his experience. So yeah, just jump right in. Kevin, tell me a little bit about yourself and your running background, kind of leading up to Cold Top TWOT 2021.
Okay, so um, basically, I had been a triathlete and marathon runner for a number of years. I'd wanted to qualify for Boston and tried and couldn't do it. So eventually one day I decided I was going to do a 100-miler to just break up the monotony. And I did Umstead, and it was great. It's local to me. Basically, I get to train on the trails every weekend, and it went really, really well. And as a result of that, my marathon times actually dropped, and I ended up qualifying for Boston that following year. So almost immediately after I qualified for Boston, my daughter was born. And so then I ended up taking a couple of years off from running, and I was coming back into running right at the end of 2019, and I had just started to get back into shape right around March of 2020, and thus everything shut down. And so I was really disappointed because I'd set myself up for a 6-hour race, and I was like, all right, I got to set my sights on something else. So I was just kind of looking around online, and I was reading John Kelly's blog about, trying to find the sweet spot for training. And then I saw that he had, recently run TWOT, and I was like, oh, wow, that's right near me. It looks really tough, and it's actually accessible to get into. So I decided to, put my name in the hat. I ran the one loop in the fall and followed it up in February with the 100-miler. More or less, it was my second 100-mile race. And I went out there, and the weather was insane. It was snowing and icy and cold, and it decimated the field really. But
Sure.
it was like, for me, it was like a comeback race. So I really had put a lot of emotional energy and physical energy into training for that race. So I managed to just keep on going and plow through all the snow and get it done.
Yeah, that's pretty different than kind of your background in road racing and Umstead.
Yeah.
Those are some of those are designed, for runners to be successful, and I think TWOT can be the antithesis of that. So yeah, tell me about your experience at the one loop in the fall. Maybe then we can transition into your time at the 100.
Yeah, so actually I came out to the fall race just to see what was going on, and I got to watch you run, and just watching your transitions was really helpful. I got some ideas, sitting around the fire with Jeremy and Guy, talking and learning about the race and learning about the trail, and then having some of the more difficult turns explained to me, and then actually going out there and experiencing them. I actually did get turned around a little bit on my first loop. I wasn't, it was over on the top of Hankey, and I wasn't sure if I'd gone on the right trail, and I kind of ran a few miles, and then I ran back a mile, and then one of the other runners came up behind me and said, no, you're going the right way, but in the wrong direction. So, so I was like, okay, all right. So I got that down. And then as I was coming down the Jeep road in October, it's easy to run down the hill rather
Sure.
than going up that little trail that goes up towards the top of the mountain there,
Mhm.
lookout. And then so he called me back on that turn as well. So there were a few times where I was about to get lost, but I got saved by the bell, I guess. And then that really helped me for navigating on when I went out for the 4-looper. Was just spending the time out there, and it was beautiful weather, and I was running a lot of it with Mike Jones, and he's a great runner, so he really pushed me out there.
Yeah, Mike's pretty quick. I've run with him quite a bit. Yeah, that's good. That's good practice. Those are the two spots, I think, if you're going to get turned around, if you've never been out there.
Yeah.
That hard left at the top of Chin Scraper is tough to find.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, once you're rolling on that fire road, it's really easy to miss that kind of veer right also.
Yeah. The only other tricky turn is that one at the top of Little Ball, because it's almost like behind you,
Right. Hairpin
No.
left. Yeah.
Yeah, because actually when I ran Grindstone a month ago or whatever, 2 months ago, I missed the turn completely. Like I was going up the climb and I was looking for it, expecting to like see it, but I guess it was at night. So the little lights kind of led me off towards Elliot's Knob there or whatever.
Right.
Or Reddish. I can't remember what the names were, but
Yeah. That's out towards Reddish that way.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's not, you are from like the Triangle area. Is that correct?
Yeah. I live in Cary, North Carolina. So
Okay. And so how is it training for a incredibly mountainous 100 when you don't have daily access to mountains?
well, so that's interesting you bring it up because Grindstone made me realize that I need to start training on mountains. I guess I managed to get by at TWOT based on just my hiking abilities. Like I'm really known as a good hiker, a fast walker. I actually do speed walk training in the summer on the track. So, I have been able to get down under 10 minutes a mile for a mile walking.
Wow.
So that's pretty good, so like I can maintain a pretty good pace, like hiking up the mountains and out there, especially with the weather. It was almost all hiking and then just basically, sledding down the backsides of the mountains. So, my time wasn't nearly as fast as I'd hoped. It was like 38 hours and I expected closer to 30. So I don't really think it factored in, but when the course is more mountainous and more runnable, like at Grindstone, I definitely saw that like my legs were just not ready for it. So this winter, I'll probably end up going to hit the local hills, I guess you might call them, and just repeats. So that's where, and I don't know, every once in a while, we take a trip out to Asheville or something like that. And I try and get out on the mountains as much as I can when we're out there as a family.
Sure. Awesome. Yeah. Make do with what you got and capitalize on those weekends you can get away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we jump into your TWOT experience, I did a similar TWOT Grindstone kind of back-to-back races. I guess they were a full year apart. And one of my favorite parts about Grindstone was realizing I was on TWOT again.
Yeah.
There was like a certain hubris knowing that I've had success on that trail. I was wondering if you felt something similar.
Well, I did and I didn't. Like it definitely helped me feel more at home, but unfortunately, my entire mental aspect for Grindstone was completely different. It was going to be my last long run before Big's backyard, so I didn't really want to push it. So trying to take it easy out there and like reeling things in and forcing yourself to slow down really like kills your motivation, honestly.
Sure.
I didn't really like it. It was really hard. I kept finding myself running too fast, and the last thing I wanted to do was like twist an ankle or hurt my knees coming down those long technical climbs or descents or whatever. So I definitely want to give Grindstone another try to see like what I can do out there. It was good to like see how basically like the two wings of Grindstone are like fairly easy, and then you have that TWOT section in the middle, and then it's brutal both ways. And so yeah, it's fun to know that like, oh, this is significantly harder, and it wasn't just a fluke out there.
Right. Yeah, that is. It's got some different characteristics than some of the other Grindstone sections.
Yeah.
So yeah, jumping into TWOT, I had a chance to look back at your race recap, which I enjoyed reading. Bringing me back to the whole TWOT experience. Kind of going back to February of 21. It looks like you spent the night before in the North River Gap parking lot.
Yeah,
to prepare for the race. Pretty impressive for a February start. I guess let's start there. Tell me about the night before and waking up before the race.
Yeah, actually getting out of, so I had basically brought every sleeping bag and sleeping pad I had, and fortunately I have a hatchback car, And so I can lay down my passenger seat and get like 8 feet of flat room. And so I just piled everything over there and climbed in. I had my mummy bag with a fleece liner, and I actually probably got one of the better night's sleep I ever had before a race. Unfortunately, getting out of the sleeping bag was very tough in the morning
Right.
because it was so cold. And so I had to turn the car on and heat it up a little bit. And, I tried to make sure the night before that I had everything ready to go, except for filling the bladders. So basically I had already dressed in my running gear, I think, and just had to take off my warm-up clothes like right before I left, and fill up my water. So it was kind of easy. I had this Kelly kettle, which basically is just just boils water, and I made oatmeal for breakfast. So it was nice not knowing that I didn't have to contend with driving in there, like the roads are pretty gnarly, and they were not able to even get over to the road crossings on the other side of the loop. So it was basically a self-supported 28-mile loop,
Wow.
4 times.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was snow on the ground at the start.
Yeah. Basically the snow started overnight. Like when I got there, it wasn't really all that bad, but I can't remember what time it was, but it was relatively early. I think it was like late, just as the sun was setting, maybe 4 or 5 p.m. that the snow started, I think. And I mean, it was a while ago. I can't really remember exactly, but I do remember thinking that, man, Eric must be having a tough time out there, because he was still trying to do the 200. And then at some point or another later in the night, I think it was around 9 o'clock, I think he came in, and I was like, oh no. And so I went over and I was like listening to what he had to say about the conditions on the trail and what we might expect and how his race went. So I was definitely, it's interesting now, having been out there 3 or 4 times, to know that like I'm a veteran, whereas like, at that time I'd only done a single loop, and I was kind of like this nobody rookie, so.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And completely different conditions.
Yeah.
So you start, it's pretty cold. I mean, I guess you're kind of wearing everything, and you warm up pretty quickly up Little Bald, I imagine. First couple loops go well.
Yeah. So the first loop, I kind of had looked at the forecast, and I knew that the morning was going to be cool, and I had tested out the snow a bit and found that it was like strong enough to hold my weight. So I kind of dressed a little bit light, knowing that I wanted to run hard at the beginning and take advantage of that hard snow, because I knew that the temperatures were supposed to get up into the 40s and 50s later. So I knew all of that hard snow was going to melt. And it was right about the time that I got the chin scraper that everything started getting soft, and we were punching through, and the snow was almost knee deep. So what's worse is it had the crust on it. So like you punch through, and then you'd like smash your shin on that crust, and it was really, and it just jarred all the momentum you had out of you. So it was just like poof, poof, poof. So after I got back to camp, I switched my socks, because they were just absolutely drenched from being in the snow all day. And I had a few hours left before nightfall, and I wanted to try and make the top a Little Bald before night. But what I didn't want to do was go so fast that I started sweating all over again, because I'd also changed my shirt and my upper body clothing. So I swapped all that out. And so it was like this dance of trying to go as fast as I could without sweating. And I basically made it almost to the top, like before the sun went down. And then, then it was like pounding through the laurels. That was by far the worst part, is the iced over laurels on Little Bald and Big Bald were just awful. Like it was like someone had taken a bunch of little tiny baseball bats to you every time you went through. And so the second loop, the laurels were really my nemesis. And at that point I was just looking forward to getting back, and because I'd planned to use Guy's strategy of do 2 loops, rest, do another loop, and then you're on your victory lap, so
Sure.
to speak. So I was looking forward to resting for a little bit after that second loop. And so, yeah, it was really neat because at night, the snow crystals were like blowing off the trees because the wind had picked up. And so that was really good. And right, like it was really cool to see all the little crystals sparkling in my headlamp. And, it made it really beautiful out there. And I think it was right around the time that I was coming down the backside of Little Bald is when the snow started to firm up again. So I was able to kind of, as long as I didn't slide down the mountain, because the backside of Little Bald was fairly heavily drifted.
Sure.
So the trail was actually like sloped and ice. But yeah, after that, I just tried to like walk or run alongside the trail, like on the flat snow. And that worked really well for basically the remainder of the race. I think it was, yeah, maybe late in the day, the second day, the snow started to melt a little bit of the snow, but by that point, I knew I was in a really good position to finish. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Right. Did you get a chance to close your eyes at all?
I did. I took about an hour rest. I didn't sleep, but I rested for about an hour in my car between my second and third loops. So
yeah, did that help to warm up? Like, did you feel like you got a second wind after that?
Yeah, a little bit. I definitely felt a little bit more mentally cognizant of what I was doing, which is critical, out there. You need to have your faculties. But I think I was also so excited to be there that that was, whereas that has been a factor in some of the other races that I've done, it was never a factor at the Wild Oak, so that was really, a good thing that kind of worked towards my favor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those things that even if it's not, you're not getting views around every corner, there's still a ton of beauty to that trail and the event as a whole. It just, makes you excited to be there. So how about your nutrition? So 28 miles unsupported, what, 9 hours a lap or something like that. It's a lot of stuff to carry. How do you keep yourself fueled and hydrated?
Oh man, that was the hardest part is trying to carry all that water for the whole loop because, I guess they had been able to get like a jug of water out there in a cooler and it was all frozen. So, it was after the first lap that I realized I'd be having to take care of myself out there. And so, yeah, I went with a 2-liter bladder of water and then both of my body bottles were full as well. And I think on a couple of the laps, I even grabbed like a small 12-ounce Coke bottle that I shoved in another pocket. So, and then really it was more the hydration than the nutrition that was the issue because, I just carried a ton of gels. I had some homemade granola bars that I'd made. And then in between loops, I ate like 2 pieces of pizza and tried to drink as much as I possibly could, kind of get ahead on my hydration.
Sure.
Because that was really the toughest part was the hydration because water's heavy. Like nutrition isn't as bad, carrying sufficient food for 9 hours, but carrying water for 9 hours was really tough. And especially considering I didn't know how my body was going to react. So I was thinking I might be out there for 10 or 12 hours per loop because it was my first time back at the ultra distance and given how hard that course is, I didn't know if I was going to slow down. Fortunately I didn't. I guess I found a rhythm where my last 3 loops were all about the same time, same splits even.
Wow.
But yeah, it was interesting because there were a couple of loops where I was coming in and I couldn't wait to like grab a Gatorade and just pound it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're behind on hydration, and that's the first thing.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, with that big long break at the halfway point, it was it wasn't as bad. So it was probably after the second and fourth loops. So, on the last loop, I just went light and tried to get in as fast as I could. Unfortunately, like the course had beaten me up so bad that it ended up being about the same amount of time, but I was really trying to go light and push it real hard. So.
Yeah, I mean, a consistent split across the last 3 loops is a victory. It's a battle of attrition out there for sure. I know I slowed down big time on the last couple loops. So yeah, how do you feel being the only finisher? It kind of takes a special person to push through that and have, you're not being chased by anybody to keep moving fast on that last loop. Kind of what was going through your head as the only one out there?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I actually was afraid of getting caught, because Peter Morgan actually started 4 hours after us, and he's a great runner. So I was afraid, like I never saw him out on the course because, he had the late start. So like I never, and like, the way the loops work, he was always going to be out there. So like I had no idea if he was making time or not. And it wasn't until I came in on my third loop and he was sitting there at camp that I realized, oh, I'm the only person who's still out here. It wasn't until I started my last loop that I realized. So I did kind of have a little bit of, that fear that there was someone chasing me. But yeah, I mean, I was actually really surprised when I came in after my second loop and found out that more than half the field had dropped. Like I think there was only like 2 or 3 people still running that even went on to a second loop,
Mhm.
So that was interesting to me, like I think I just played the weather and the conditions to my advantage. And I think a lot of people really got discouraged when the snow got soft, because it really did make it tough and concerning. So, me knowing the forecast and knowing that things were going to improve, I think really helped me keep going.
How did it feel when you finished? I guess it's a good question to close on.
Oh, I was destroyed. I mean, I was barely coherent, like that was by far the longest I'd run distance wise and time wise. I think when I ran Umstead, it's 100 miles, and I did it in like 20 hours. So, or 20 and a half hours. So 38 more than 38 hours on my feet. That's something I'd never done before. And so it was really good. I was looking forward to like getting back to camp and having food, because Steve had set up at the parking lot because, they couldn't get out to Camp Todd. So I was just looking forward to like finally sitting down and like letting my feet rest, because I had at one point, because there were a number of blowdowns on the trail, I had like severely injured my ankle because like a branch had like swung back and nailed me right in the front of my ankle. So that really started to bother me on that last loop, which is why I guess the time was equivalent to the other loops when I was trying real hard to push.
Right.
But yeah, just looking forward to like sitting. And I remember talking with Jason and Antoinette and Guy, and I remember thinking I was coherent, but I don't know if I actually succeeded in doing so. But yeah, I was just ready to climb into my car, into that nice warm sleeping bag, and rest.
Yeah, that was my MO as well. So I know that feeling. So TWOT is, a different race, and I imagine you hold it as special as most other finishers do. So what makes TWOT different for you than other ultra events that you've done?
Well, I like it because it feels like a glorified camping trip, hiking trip sort of thing. Like you go out there and you see familiar faces, you hang out by the fire, but then you go out and you do this crazy tough running experience, and it's all, well, like I guess in my experience, it was completely self-supported, like and so it really has helped me become more self-sufficient outdoors. And, it's something that, I grew up as a Boy Scout and Eagle Scout. So like camping and hiking has always been big for me, but it's allowed me to go and tackle other like remote running experiences. Like I've gone and set a couple of FKTs in the mountains, in the swamps and stuff like that. So, like having something that big under my belt was really cool, and to know that no pacers, no crew, no aid stations, like you have to like think through the whole process. And so it was actually when we actually started having races again, that was actually the adjustment I had to make, was realizing I could travel light and get food from aid stations and things like that, or having a crew. I think this at Biggs was like the first time I ever had a specifically dedicated race crew. So
Right.
so that's actually taking some getting used to now for me, because of between starting with TWOT right at the beginning of the pandemic and having this long period of isolation. So, but I just love getting out there in the woods. Even after I did my grindstone trail work, me and one of my buddies, we went camping out. I can't even remember where it was, but it was right a few hours down the road. So I mean, that whole area is great.
Yeah, and it's rather unexplored. I mean, you see some bikes out there occasionally, but it's rare you see other runners out there.
Right.
Except for TWOT weekend.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of folks watching these interview series are considering TWOT. What advice would you give to somebody who is an aspiring TWOT, either single looper or 4 or 8 looper?
Okay, so those are all, as Ben said, different sports. For the one loopers, I'd say, just be in shape and be ready to like tackle some rugged terrain, get used to technical rocky climbs and descents. Make sure you have a decent ability to run with like a fair amount of water, because I mean, even the shortest distance between aid stations, I think, or between water is 10 miles. So you got to be able to carry a significant amount of water for that. For 4 loopers, I would say get comfortable running at night and being alone. Just alone running at night is one of the biggest things. It is a really tough and hard 100-miler. But it's really the isolation that is the biggest issue, like as far as the course, I mean, there are tough courses out there, there are rugged courses out there, but it's just the fact that you're alone and you have to take care of yourself. And if something goes wrong, you could be out all by yourself. And that's really what sets it apart, is you got to be able to take care of yourself. You got to carry extra gear in order to be safe. And then, I don't know about the 8 loop. Hopefully I'll find out this February and I can have some better advice. But I mean, my guess is probably just go slow, go way slower than you think you need to. And I talked to Todd Thomas at Grindstone this year, and he said, make sure you don't beat up your quads, like take care of your legs, train for your up and down, because 60,000 feet of climbing and descent is going to take its toll no matter what. So that's about all I can say about that.
Yeah, I'll withhold any questions for the 200, the upcoming 200, for your next interview when you inevitably finish that one.
Right.
So your conditions in TWOT were horrid, to say the least.
Yeah.
They can be that way. I know you got the 200 coming up, but I'm curious if you've got any interest in doing a faster TWOT 100. Looks like your resume alludes to the fact that you could go out there and crush it.
Yeah. Actually, I do. I mean, it's not high on my priority list, but it is definitely something that I want to do at some point. Right now I'm still kind of, I'm relatively new to ultra running, like if you think about it, like I've really only been running for 2 years, like consistently. So, yeah, I definitely want to try and get out there maybe for a hot TWOT and see what I can do. It just, the only problem is that October and September are like prime race seasons, elsewhere. So I'd have to like get lucky on a February run, or just, cut my losses and go try it out. So I mean,
Right.
that'll probably be, a little bit later down the line, maybe in a couple of years, because there's 3 or 4 races that I want to really do, that are in that October timeframe. So, but maybe in a couple of years, yeah, I definitely want to give it a go and see how fast I can go.
Awesome. Yeah, that's exciting. Yeah, anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I guess that was a good round of questions, and you covered it all.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm excited to, reading your race report kind of brought me back, and even this conversation allowed me to relive some fun TWOT memories myself. So
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to your interview. Like I said, getting out there and being able to watch you run was pretty inspiring, and like a little bit of a learning experience for me. Like I said, I'm relatively new, and they're just like little things that I picked up just watching. They probably wouldn't have, you probably still would have finished as fast as, or relatively fast, but it probably made things a little easier and a little, I guess just, it just allows you to put your energy into solving some other problem or pushing a little
yeah,
harder,
for
like when you're
sure.
not having to worry about like sweat and like your clothes and chafing and things like that. And so like, yeah, it was definitely interesting to see like you and Trevor come in and like have that time to like watch what you guys are doing. So I did have one question for you though. I know that you
Yeah.
did that biking and running FKT down there and on, what is it, the Triple Crown?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So I guess what kind of inspired you to do the double, like instead of just the running loop?
Oh, I wanted to that was like pure TWOT training. And I knew I wanted a big day in the mountains, but
Okay.
I didn't want to be banged up, after running 60 miles. So I figured, why not
Okay.
throw a bike on either end? And, you know, I could do it from my doorstep, which is nice. I've always
Okay.
kind of it was completely self-supported. Well, that's kind of a lie. I rode my bike to the official start, did the FKT, and then I absolutely took the ride home for my wife, the mile home from the official the official end. So it wasn't fully self-supported.
Oh,
But the official FKT starts from a restaurant downtown. Yeah, so it was TWOT training, being out at night, running at night, and I'm not terribly fast. I think my edge increases with distance, so that FKT of just the Triple Crown Loop is incredibly stout right now.
yeah. Yeah.
So adding in the bike made it a bit lower of a bar to clear.
Okay. Yeah. I hear you on that. Okay, cool. I was just curious about that because I looked at it myself. So,
All right, thanks, Kevin. Have a great day.
all right. Thanks. Thanks for your time, Danny. Good talking
Yeah,
with you. Bye.
likewise.